Good morning and welcome back to Morning Coffee with Doug. I have a different coffee this morning. I bought a bottle of Wanda instant coffee just this morning. This is my very first cup. I know about Wanda because they sell it in the vending machines quite often here in Kuala Lumpur. So I know Wanda coffee, like iced coffee in a can. And this is my first experiment with their instant coffee. It looks like a freeze-dried. This is their gold class, masterful blend of two single origins, richer and smoother. But yeah, tastes fine. I like freeze-dried coffees in the instant coffee line. And usually they're really expensive, like twice as expensive almost as regular, the freeze-dried. But this is about the same price, so I thought I would give it a try. And other than a new coffee from Wanda, this morning I have robots and robotics on my mind again, and that's because my last video that I posted as a morning coffee with Doug video was inspired by seeing the Unitree G1 robots performing at the gala, the spring Gala festival or whatever it's called in China. I wasn't even aware of that huge performance, but I guess every year it's a big deal in China and worldwide, and it really was not on my radar for Chinese New Year celebrations, but I stumbled across it this year because they had the big kung fu acrobatics performance on stage with Unitree's G1 robots. And at that time, I had never heard of Unitree. I didn't even know what the robots were called. Basically, I didn't know anything about them other than their agility just blew my mind. The things that these robots could do on stage seemed like a fundamental leap forward from what was happening even last year, right? I have this mental image of Atlas, the robot from Boston Dynamics, and all these other humanoid robots I'd seen, and they all still kind of look like robots. They got Atlas doing some pretty fancy stuff, jumping over things and running, and was becoming much more human in its movements and much more agile. But nothing like what these robots were doing on stage all of a sudden, and just kind of blew my mind. And it just got me thinking about robotics and humanoid robots in particular, and I realized I didn't really know anything. So the last video that I posted talking about this, I was just talking off the top of my head, and I was just grasping at little thoughts that I had, such as I was initially so impressed with what these robots were doing, but then as I rewatched the same performance over and over, I noticed, for example, that the robots were generally much shorter, smaller, and lighter than something like Atlas. And that has a big effect on what physical movements it can do, like all of the backflips and somersaults and kung fu moves. A lot of that is made possible because of advances in AI, of course. I don't really know much about how AI fits into I know nothing about how much AI fits in, but I'm sure AI, the explosion in AI, has had a knock-on effect, making these humanoid robots far more intelligent and agile, able to execute movements that they never could before. So AI is involved, but I don't know how. But then I noticed that Atlas, for example, is a much bigger robot, taller and heavier. It's not designed to do backflips. But the Unitree G1 struck me as a robot that was designed to perform like that. And so if you're comparing that Unitree G1 performance with Atlas kind of stumbling around and not looking as agile, and you think, oh, this Chinese company is just 100 years in the future compared to all the other robotics companies, I think you're going down the wrong path. because you're comparing apples and oranges. So anyway, I was having these general thinking out loud thoughts about robots. And I'm sure I said a lot of things that sounded very naive and uninformed, etc. Because yeah, when it comes to robots, I am very uninformed and very naive. I'm just thinking about them from a casual, having coffee in the morning perspective. I didn't do any research into robotics. Like I said, I didn't even know what those robots were. I didn't know the name of the company, the name of the robot itself. I didn't know their history. I knew nothing about them. So anyway. So this morning, I thought, well, why don't we just do a little bit of research? So what I did is I typed into Google, basically, what are the most advanced, the most promising, the most popular humanoid robots in the world? Can you list them for me? And so that's how I started with Google, a Google search, and that linked me to a website article. I'll put it up on the screen here. And it is from a website called Humanoid Robotics Technology. And the title of this article is Top 12 Humanoid Robots of 2026. And then it listed them from 1 to 12. And the fact that there were 12 of them kind of blew my mind. I had no idea. I mean, these were just the top 12. So how many more of them are there? So anyway, if we just scroll down this article, we see that number 1 on their list is Optimus Gen 2 from Tesla. It's like, oh yeah, okay, yeah. Tesla makes robots. They have a robotics division. Number 2 is something I had never heard of, 1X. That's the name of the company, and the robot is called Neo. Number 3, Electric Atlas from Boston Dynamics. Number 4, that's the one from the Chinese New Year celebration, Unitree Robotics from China, the G1. And then we have a company called Agility Robotics. They make something called Digit. Then there's Aptronic with Apollo, Neura Robotics with 4NE-1, Figure AI, Figure 03, and then Sanctuary AI with a robot called Phoenix. And I think Sanctuary, to my amazement, is a Canadian company. I didn't even know there was a well-known Canadian robotics company. 10, Deep Robotics with DRO2, then 11, Robot Era, L7, and then finally a company called Engineered Arts with a robot called Mecha. So I read through all of that, and I was looking at the metrics for each of them, and the metrics were really quite interesting. It illustrated what I was talking about, where Atlas, for example, weighs 90 kilograms. And that's a pretty hefty weight, 90 kilograms. I mean, that's a big adult, a male adult. But the Unitree robots, the one doing all of the flips, they're actually heavier than I thought, but they were like 40 to 50 kilograms. So half the weight of Atlas. And Atlas is 1.9 meters tall, and G1 from Unitree is 1.4 meters tall. So that kind of illustrated what I was imagining, that Atlas is actually a much bigger and heavier robot than the G1 from Unitree. So anyway, I went through all that list, and I read through all of the listed specs there. Was quite interesting, talking about the height of each robot, the weight, the payload capacity, like how much it can lift, battery life. And then as I was reading through this, I was reminded of a few things. For example, I remember Atlas from Boston Dynamics. I've been following it probably, I don't know how long the company has been around. I'll get into that in a minute, but it's been around a long time. And I've been watching Atlas videos, it feels like my whole lifetime almost, for many, many years. And I remember Atlas being hydraulic with a gas-powered engine. And it was this giant machine with like a huge set of shoulders and a giant back, because there was a gas-powered motor in there. And when they turned on Atlas, it was like a lawnmower firing up, like or a motorcycle engine. You can hear the engine revving, and it was like a monstrous thing thundering down the parking lot. And I'd totally forgotten about that version of Atlas, but I remember watching all these videos of that huge engine-powered thing. But this new Atlas is all electric. So they took Atlas from being powered by like a motorcycle engine and hydraulics. They replaced all of that with batteries and electric motors, which is pretty amazing. So that's the new Atlas that we have today. After I went over that article, read the whole article, read all the specs for all the different robots, I found that I was curious about the companies, because I don't know, my instinct was to see, I thought I would see the names of massive corporations, big industrial giants. And yet all these robotics companies, they had weird names. And I started to think about that. It's like, I've never heard of any of these companies. Their names are really quite odd. And then the names of the robots, other than Atlas, are really quite boring. They're more like serial numbers. And that got me thinking about these companies. And I thought, you know what? I'll bet a lot of them are connected to universities, more like research centers. And I thought, I'll bet you a lot of them are startups. Like, they aren't actual functioning companies. Like, they don't even have a product to sell, but they are developing robotics, and they put them on display more like advertising or media hype to attract more venture capitalism. And that's probably what's keeping these companies alive. That was my instinct. So I went over to one of my AI buddies for my conversation this morning. I picked ChatGPT, and I told ChatGPT exactly what I just told you. I found this article about the top 12 robots, humanoid robots in the world, and then I listed them for ChatGPT, every company name and their robot, and then I asked ChatGPT, what can you tell me about these robots? In particular, tell me about the companies. How big are they? How many employees do they have? How much money do they have? How long have they been around? Are they startups? Are they connected with major corporations? Or are they connected to universities? Like, what's actually going on with all these robots? And then ChatGPT just broke it down very, very quickly for me, of course. Took a couple of seconds, and then just gave me this amazing list, giving all this background information to all of these companies. I'm going to be looking down at my screen a little bit here, just so I haven't memorized these facts, but as I look at what ChatGPT told me, I found out, of course, that Tesla is a big, powerful player, because it's a huge company. They have their, electric car, they have so many different industries. It's one of the largest, if not the biggest, corporation in the world at the moment. It's Tesla, from the United States, 140,000 employees, but their robot, Optimus Gen 2, is not really a big player in the industry. According to ChatGPT, Optimus is an internal project led by Elon Musk himself. And it's not a university spin-out. It's built entirely in-house, and it's a deep AI crossover with Tesla's autonomous driving team. Number 2 in the list, 1X with Neo, is from Norway. There you go. The number 2 humanoid robot in the world, according to this article, is from Norway. And this company is very small, 100+ employees, and it is a startup with private venture capital. And they're focusing on humanoids for home and service environments. Then we get to another big player, Boston Dynamics, with Electric Atlas. And of course, we know Boston Dynamics is based in the United States. Big company, founded in 1992, over 1,500 employees, originally an MIT spin-off, which makes sense. But one thing I didn't know is that it has been bought out by a series of big companies, and currently they are owned by Hyundai. So Hyundai has like an 80% ownership of Boston Dynamics, and they are developing Atlas mainly to work for Hyundai, to work on the factory floor, on the assembly line, building Hyundai cars and other things, so which I wasn't aware of. But again, that makes sense to me when you think about, like I said, you're looking at the Unitree G1 robot doing kung fu, and then you compare it to Atlas. Well, they're designing Atlas to build cars. They're not really designing it to do backflips and kung fu moves, things like that. It's a completely different approach to what they're building. But yeah, they're part of Hyundai, basically, which is something I was completely unaware of. Number 4, Unitree Robotics with the G1 that started this whole thing. From China, of course, founded in 2016, several hundred employees, a private company, but they are best known for low-cost quadruped robots, which I find really fascinating, because when I think of robots and Boston Dynamics, I think about Atlas, but of course we all think about Spot, the dog robot, right, on 4 legs. And Spot is a huge product for Boston Dynamics, and I guess Unitree has their own version of it. It doesn't say the name of it, but a big advantage of Unitree is that their quadruped, their Spot competitor, is much, much cheaper, which is an advantage that most of these Chinese companies have. They are producing, in many cases, better technology at a much cheaper price. So that's where it's kind of an arms race, I think, in the end, between the United States and China when it comes to humanoid robots. That's the feeling that I'm getting. Number 5 was Agility Robotics with Digit, and it's also from the United States. 200 to 300 employees, originated at Oregon State University, backed by Amazon, so they do have a big corporate partner. And I guess because they're connected with Amazon, they're probably building Digit to work in a warehouse, replace all the human workers that are doing the warehouse work at Amazon. This robot is being developed to do that kind of work. And the interesting thing about Digit, I just remembered this from the picture, its legs are completely different. All the other humanoid robots have legs designed like human legs. They can do more than human legs can do, but they look and function kind of like human legs. But Digit, they designed its legs like a bird, so that the knee bends backwards rather than forwards like a human leg. And they did that because a bird leg bending backwards makes it more agile in terms of a warehouse environment, where it can lower its body, pick something up, and then go back up again. That backward bending bird structure gives it advantages. So that's kind of the main point of Digit from Agility Robotics, which is kind of fascinating. It's the only humanoid on here that has a non-human shape in any way, that is based on an animal feature, the way its leg works. Number 6 is Apptronic. The company is called Apptronic. Their robot is called Apollo. and from the United States, another American company founded in 2016, spun out of the University of Texas. And not surprising, you get the name Apollo, and it turns out that they have a strong history of collaborating with NASA, space, right? So the robot is called Apollo, and this company has academic roots from the University of Texas. Number 7, Neura Robotics with the 4NE-1. That's what I mean about the names of these robots. That tells me it's kind of academic, coming out of a research lab, that sort of thing. Otherwise, they would give it a better name than the 4NE-1. But this one is from Germany, Neura Robotics, 2019, 200 to 300 employees. And they focus on cognitive robotics and industrial collaboration with an AI-driven approach, and they're tied to a specific university. But yeah, that's another company based in Germany. Is that the second one from Germany? No, so far we've got United States, Norway, United States, China, United States, Germany. Now the next one, Figure AI, and their humanoid Figure 03. Again, not exactly an imaginative name. From the United States, a very new company founded in 2022, venture-backed, like venture capitalism, and they have major funding from Microsoft, NVIDIA, OpenAI, and some others. And they have partnerships with BMW for factory testing. So it looks like they're getting a lot of early venture capital, a lot of funding flowing in from venture capitalism and from all these major corporations. So Figure AI could be one to look out for in the future. And looking at the photo, yeah, it looks very high tech. One thing I noticed when I was looking at all these photos of the robots is the faces. Of course, they don't need faces. They give them a face on the front just to make them a little bit more comfortable for humans. Like something like Atlas, I noticed, I was reading about Atlas, all these robots have it. They have like 360-degree vision. So Atlas has a 360 camera here and here and here and here, a whole ring of 360 cameras. So there's no front, there's no back, there's no side. So it doesn't even really need to have a head, right? They just put it on there to make it look more humanoid. And even when it has a head, it doesn't have to have a face on the front, because everything is the same to the robot. It doesn't need to turn its head at all. The sensors go in 360 degrees. If I need to look over there, I have to turn my head, I have to do these things because I have a face. But robots don't have that requirement. But they give them a face anyway, because I was doing some reading about this. It makes people more comfortable when they have a face. It makes them more approachable, but it's also for human interaction and safety reasons. So these robots actually do a lot of human gestures that aren't even required. Like if you tell Atlas to go over there, pick something up and bring it back, Atlas can just go there and get it and come back. It doesn't need to look, right? Because it already has cameras facing in that direction. But they program Atlas so that when it starts a task, it turns its head and looks in that direction. And that tells humans, oh, the robot is coming this way. They program into the robot certain human movements that we use as signals about what a person is going to do. We see them getting ready to go in that direction. And if the robot didn't do it, we would be surprised by their movements, which is fascinating. And I also read that they deliberately build in pauses. that the robot can react and respond much, much faster than it does. You give it a command, it just goes. But again, that could be a safety concern for humans because we're not expecting that fast movement. So they build in a pause, like a human pause. You tell me, go plug in the kettle. I look first. Oh, where's the kettle? Oh, there's the kettle, there's the plug. Then I make up my mind what I'm going to do, and then I walk over to the kettle. And if people can see what I'm going to do, so they build that into the robot's programming, so that Atlas will pause. You give it a command, and then it, as if it's thinking, oh, okay. And then it starts to move. So a lot of these human movements, behaviors, the robots don't even need them. They're just extra fluff that they build into them. And then when it comes to the face, I noticed that a lot of them have eyes. They put in 2 eyes that don't really do anything, but they're there to look like eyes. But they never give them a mouth. Like you don't see a mouth on the front of any of these, which is also kind of interesting. Why eyes, but no mouth? And I didn't read anything about that, but I'm guessing a mouth conveys a lot of emotion for us, whether we're smiling, frowning, angry, upset, however we're feeling, we can see it mainly in the set of our mouth. I think I had my camera way too dark for that first part. I didn't realize I had the settings all mixed up. Still experimenting with my camera and manual settings. I hope this looks a little bit better. But yeah, I was just talking about how robots don't have a mouth. And I saw this demonstration the other day on YouTube. It was quite fascinating, where they took a photo of a person with their eyes. So they're showing just their eyes, and the eyes never changed. It was always the same eyes. But then they took the lower half of the face, the mouth, and they changed it from a smile to a frown to a set look. Like they kept changing the way the mouth looked. They didn't change the eyes, but every time they changed the shape of the mouth, the eyes looked different. Like when the person looked angry because of their mouth, my brain saw anger in the eyes. And if and then they changed it to a smile and the person was happy, when I looked at the eyes, I saw happy eyes. So my brain kept telling me that the eyes were changing. Oh, those are happy eyes, those are angry eyes. But in fact, the eyes was always the same photo. It never changed. It was just our brains interpreting how the eyes looked based on what it was seeing in the mouth. So in fact, that kind of demonstrated it's actually the eyes have nothing to do with how a person is feeling. We infer that based on the mouth. So the mouth is much more important. So they can stick a couple of eyes on a robot. We're not going to react. We don't see anything. Well, those are just sensory organs. But if they put a mouth, now suddenly they have to think about the shape. Does it move? And then they're suddenly conveying all kinds of emotions. And then that's just who wants to deal with that? So I find that kind of interesting. And it made me realize that in all of these humanoid robots, all of the demonstrations, in almost none of them was there any communication. It was all about movement and performing tasks. None of them ever spoke, right? The G1 from Unitree doing the backflips, they didn't have a sequence where they went up to it with a microphone and said, hey, how do you feel about Chinese New Year? You know, they weren't talking to the robot. Nobody talks to Atlas. That's not what these robots are designed to do. I think one of them here on the list is more meant as a human stand-in, that it has emotions, facial features, and you talk to it. But the vast majority of them, I don't even know if they can speak. I don't think they even have that built into them. And I hadn't really thought about that before. Number 9 is of particular interest to me as a Canadian. Number 9 is Sanctuary AI. It's the name of the company. And their robot at least has a good name, I guess, Phoenix. I don't know why they would choose Phoenix. That has got a lot of meaning for me, Phoenix. But anyway, it's called Phoenix, and it's from Canada, based in Vancouver, been around since 2018, 150 plus employees, a private company, backed by Canadian tech investors and government programs. And the Sanctuary AI Phoenix robot, it does look very cool. It looks closer to a like Terminator than all the other robots. It looks buff. They look like they gave it muscles. It gave it broad shoulders and then a narrow waist, like it's a tough dude, which is kind of interesting because according to what I read here, this robot, Phoenix, focuses on a seamless human-robot interaction. So it's more about the AI part of the robot. So it can understand and respond to human cues, making it ideal for service and collaborative work environments. So it's a unique feature, advanced cognitive AI for human interaction. So I'm gonna look into that robot some more. I'm curious, does it talk? It looks like it might talk. It looks like it has speakers where its mouth should be, but it has a kind of interesting grill where its eyes, instead of two dots for eyeballs, it's got like a square, which again makes me think it has a laser beam. It actually looks like a weapon, which is kind of interesting to me. This is the one robot that they describe as this is the one designed to talk to you, collaborate with you, and yet this is the one that looks like it's out to kick my butt, and it's got a laser beam that's going to come out of its head, and then it's got muscles and it's going to punch me. So that's kind of funny. Number 10, Deep Robotics. The robots are called DR01 and DR02 from China, founded in 2017. 300 plus employees, originally known for quadrupeds, similar to the other Chinese company, Unitree. That's interesting, because these are both older companies going all the way back to 2017, and it makes sense that they started with quadrupeds, because I think they have more obvious real-world usage. Like humanoids, we're not really sure yet whether they're going to work. They're very much in the experimental phase, I think. They're in the hype phase, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But quadrupeds, robots that can walk over rough surfaces, can go anywhere, well, you can instantly see that they have uses in industry, in the military, search and rescue. So I think a lot of the early robotics companies dealing with autonomous robots, they were looking at quadrupeds first because they're more stable and they have less demand for energy. A humanoid robot standing upright requires a lot more energy to run it. Like even standing, it has to constantly balance itself. It's always, but a quadruped on all fours, when it's not moving, it just sits there like a chair. So it doesn't need as much constant energy to keep it running. And of course, the quadruped, like Spot, it's not really designed to do things. They're designed for sensory input. So you basically send a quadruped like Spot into a dangerous environment with cameras and sensors to look around, gather information, send it back to the humans, and then the humans can go in and do the tasks. So now, I wasn't aware of this, but I guess Spot from Boston Dynamics, it's already a hugely successful product. I didn't know this, but it's out there in the world. A lot of them are in industrial settings where they basically set them free to just wander around following a route, I guess, looking for anything wrong. They have sensors and they do security, of course, but they're just monitoring all the equipment. So the humans are back in the office monitoring computer screens, and then the Spot and these quadruped robots from these Chinese companies, they're out there just all night long, 24 hours a day, just walking and scanning everything. And if they see a problem, the information goes back, But I guess they're being used all over the place, which I really wasn't aware of. But anyway, that's number 10 from China, Deep Robotics. And what does their robot look like again? Yeah, it looks kind of cool. So their humanoid robot is It's an industrial grade humanoid built for all weather deployment. So what this Chinese company made as their specialty is that this is a super tough robot. It can go into really harsh environments, so it's waterproof, things like that. That's kind of what they focused on. And the photo of the robot has it in the water, so it can actually do things that the other robots can't do yet. So that's what this company is all about. Number 11, also from China, Robot Era is the company, and their robot is called L7. Very new company, started up in 2023, venture backed. And what does their robot look like? It looks pretty cool. They chose a photo of the robot just posing like this, crossed arms. Hey, what's going on? Like a cool guy. He's got Riz. And L7 is a versatile humanoid designed to showcase the future. So it has a modular design, state-of-the-art locomotion, designed to be flexible and easily reconfigured. So making it suitable for demonstration purposes. So it's a new company from 2023, and the L7 was made more as a way of advertising what this company can build for you. It's like a demonstration robot rather than something that they can start sending off the assembly line, which is quite interesting. And number 12, the last one, from the United Kingdom. Company is called Engineered Arts, and the robot is called Ameca. A Mecha. A very strange name. Founded in 2005. Oh, okay, this is the one I was talking about. Ameca is more focused on expressive humanoid faces and entertainment interaction rather than industrial labor. So yeah, if you go down to number 12, this one has a face, like a full-on human face with real eyes and a nose and a mouth, ears, and then I guess it has all kinds of facial expressions, and it can talk to you and you can have conversations with it. So that is Ameca from Engineered Arts, celebrated for its incredibly lifelike expressions and natural interaction capabilities. 1.7 meters tall. Advanced voice and conversational AI. And as far as I know, none of the others are designed that way. Maybe the one from Canada, Phoenix, it looks like it might be able to talk to you, but the other ones don't look like they're designed to talk. But I haven't done a deep dive into each individual robot. I don't know. Most of these seem to have a very specific task in mind. They're being designed to work and do specific jobs in various human settings. And of course, that's the entire point of a humanoid robot, that the only reason they're building them is because our world was designed for the human body. Because like a humanoid shape doesn't make a lot of sense. It's not the most efficient design, really. Robots, to get work done, could have much more efficient designs, but then they may not be able to maneuver in the human environment as well. Like, say you wanted to go to the shopping mall and you wanted to bring your robot with you, well, your robot has to be able to get into your car and sit in the front seat, right? And if a robot has a bizarre mechanical shape, it doesn't fit in the car. I haven't heard anybody talk about that, but that just jumped into my head. Or maybe the robot someday will be able to drive your car like a human driving it. And then, of course, it has to have the physical shape of a human body, going in and out of elevators, up and down stairs, going around tables in a restaurant, navigating a kitchen, a crowded kitchen where everybody's busy and there's sinks and stoves and shelving units. And they have to do all the things with their hands, get down a pot from the top shelf that a human would do, chop onions, whatever it is the robot is being asked to do. And that's why you might have a humanoid shape for these sorts of robots, just to navigate the human world. If they didn't have to do that, then they wouldn't choose this design. They would choose a much more efficient design than the human body. But yeah, so that's kind of interesting. And then I had this long conversation with ChatGPT, and I'm going to use that conversation to talk about the next topics, because yeah, when I was thinking about all these 12 robots, and then that led to another thought, and I asked ChatGPT, and then the AI's answer led to another thought. And then one of the things I asked ChatGPT was, well, considering these 12 robots and where they're from, how does it break down in terms of countries? Who's dominating the robotics industry? Like, what's going on there exactly? And ChatGPT said that, well, in the United States, the top runner, of course, you've got Tesla, Boston Dynamics, Agility, Aptronic, and Figure. And the other major player is China, with Unitree, Deep Robotics, Robot Era. And then you've got Europe, with a company from Germany, from Norway, from the UK. And then you've got Canada on the list. Who knew? We Canadians, we're just happy to be involved. We're just happy to be mentioned, right? Makes us very happy. So basically, it's a US-China arms race with European specialty players. That's how ChatGPT defined the humanoid robot world. And then there is this whole interaction between university roots, like research academics, where students and professors and scientists are just building stuff because they can. They're experimenting in university labs. And then when they come up with something that actually has real world applications, then corporations are getting involved. But not a lot of huge companies are involved in humanoid robots yet. So basically you've got Tesla and Hyundai through Boston Dynamics. And those are the only two. All the other ones are more like startups. So that's where the industry is right now, according to ChatGPT. And what's new is one of the more fascinating things, because as I said, just a couple of years ago, to my mind, robots looked very, very different, far less advanced. But now we've got better batteries, AI foundation models, cheap actuators, and manufacturing scale in China. So that combination of all of these changes in the industry has led to an explosion of new players on the market. All of these new startups showing up like in 2023, 2022, and then producing all these new designs. It's because of a combination of all of those features. And then I found I was really curious about the real world applications. So I asked ChatGPT, okay, we've got all these new robots, humanoid robots. We've looked at these 12 companies. They're all making these amazing products, but how much of it is hype, just marketing buzzwords and excitement and looking to the future? How much is hype and how much is real? Can you break that down for me? And then ChatGPT listed these companies, and the first ones he said are mostly hype. Great demos, but they don't have any real world applications yet. And the mostly hype companies were Tesla with the Optimus Gen 2, 1X with the Neo, Neura Robotics with the 4NE1, Robot Era with the L7. So a lot of these are prototypes, research oriented, and then, a standout, of course, is Optimus from Tesla. I do like that name, of course. You instantly think robot when you hear Optimus. But even though Optimus is really flashy and pretty amazing, it's still mainly hype. Tesla's main business is cars and energy. So their robotics is kind of secondary, early prototypes and engineering and experimentation phase. And those are the hype companies. Then there are the mid-ground, kind of hype, but they're getting some real-world applications. That would be engineered arts with Ameca, the one that talks like a real human. Aptronic with Apollo. Only two there. And then the closest to real deployment, the obvious one for me, again, is Boston Dynamics, and that is number one with Electric Atlas, and that's because they are partnered with Hyundai. I mean, these robots are being built to go to work as soon as possible. So they even have them in Hyundai's factories now, training them alongside humans to do all the jobs that they do. And they actually are out there working in the real world. And of course, Boston Dynamics has Spot as well, which is working all around the world. And then the Chinese company Unitree with the G1. Unitree mass produces robots, especially quadrupeds like Spot. So their hardware is being sold and shipped all around the world. So that's a real company selling real robots that are doing real work, just like Boston Dynamics. Agility Robots with Digit. That's the one with the bird legs. And that, of course, is being used in warehouses with Amazon, but they're still just pilot programs. They aren't fully deployed yet, but they are working with various corporate partners to test their robots in real world situations. So they're not hype anymore. They're an actual tool that they're trying to sell. Figure AI, not in major commercial developments, but they have access to huge partners like Microsoft, NVIDIA, and they have a roadmap towards actual real-world deployment and applications. And Sanctuary AI, Phoenix, the one Canadian member, is also in the real category, which I'm surprised. But they have a small number of real prototype robots completed, and their target is general purpose labor, but they're closer to actual deployment than many of the startups. So I found that really quite interesting to think about how much is hype, how much is real, particularly for humanoid robots, because it feels like to me like a ton of money is pouring into that field right now, and everybody's talking about it, and everybody is excited about it. But at the same time, I can see a future where the whole industry just collapses. It's like, okay, we were really excited about humanoid robots for a while. We tried them out in hospitals. You try to have a robot come into the room and make the bed, serve meals to patients, change dressings on wounds, like even do medical things. And then they find out that, liability, like if there can be an accident, liability insurance costs are just way too high. A human makes a mistake, maybe it's a limited error. A robot with its greater strength and energy reserves, it screws up. That's a huge, massive lawsuit on your hands. Maintenance costs can just be way too high for robots. And we may just find out that we tried to use robots all over the world, these humanoid robots, and you know what? They're just more trouble than they're worth. And then they decide that, you know what, this humanoid shape doesn't work. Let's go back to robotic shapes, and let's go back to the classics. And then I can see a future where humanoid robots just don't work out, and maybe it was all just hype, and nothing really became universal in our world. But it's an interesting question. The other thing that jumped out at me and that I asked ChatGPT is, why aren't there more big industrial giants involved? In all the reading I did, they mentioned Tesla, but Tesla's just playing around with robots. And we've got Hyundai with Boston Dynamics, but that's it. Where are all the other huge companies? Where's Toyota, Samsung, on and on and on, these massive corporations worldwide? How come their names aren't showing up here? And then the way ChatGPT explained it to me is, well, it's still just too risky. They said, ChatGPT said, well, these big companies that are about making money, they're all about return on investment. And they've looked at humanoid robots and they said, it's too early. They're playing the waiting game. They will jump in once the robots have proven themselves that if they invest that money into a robot, they're going to get their money back with a profit for their investors. But until these humanoid robots show a solid return on investment possibility, they're not going to touch it. They're there, they're kind of dabbling, they're keeping their finger on the pulse of robotics, but you're just not going to find these giant consumer brand corporations in robotics just yet, because there isn't a proven return on investment yet. And that's what ChatGPT told me. And connected to that is an idea that I was circling around constantly while I was thinking about this, is that, okay, huge corporations are not involved in humanoid robots, but that doesn't mean they're not involved in robots. Of course they are. And then I was talking with ChatGPT about this, and I learned these names of giant industrial corporations out there that I had never heard of. And I've got some on the screen here. There's something called ABB, ABB, something called KUKA, KUKA, all capital letters, Fanuc, Yaskawa, and yeah, these are the companies that make actual robots that are doing the real work in factories, in assembly lines. You know, if you see any assembly line today building a car, it's a lineup of 100 robots. And one of these robots might just be an arm, an actuated arm that's bolted to the floor, and it's busy welding something together. And then there's another arm that picks this up and holds it into place. So each one of those is a robot, right? And they are in use in factories and assembly lines by the thousands, by the millions all over the world. So the robotics industry is massive, and these are all built. These robots are built by huge corporations that the average person, or maybe just a dummy like me, has never even heard of. I've heard of Samsung and I've heard of Toyota, etc., because I can go to the stores and they sell products to me. But then those companies have factories building those products, and the robots building those products are built by these companies, these behind the scenes huge industrial corporations that I had never heard of. And in fact, that leads into an interesting idea of what is a robot then? Because when you think about one of those arms in a factory that's just sort of bolted to the floor, you instantly think, well, where's the rest of the poor robot? It's like they had a robot and then they cut off its arm and they bolted just the arm to the floor. But of course, that arm is not one part of a larger robot. It is the robot, right? It's only because we tend to think of humanoid robots as a robot and they cut off the poor guy's arm and they're just making the arm do the work. So You could even think of the entire factory, the assembly line, is one giant robot. It's an organism made up of all these other individual robotic systems that are all working together to build the car. So that kind of leads into an interesting area. And I was talking with a ChatGPT about that. It's like, okay, well, then what is a robot? How is it defined? Because again, I always end up talking about my kettle because I'm always drinking coffee and sitting here in front of my camera. I can see my little portable kettle over there. And then my kettle, it performs a task for me. I push the button, it boils the water for me. Is that a robot? And then ChatGPT says, no, that's not a robot. And I says, well, what if I put wheels on it? And then after the water is boiled, then the kettle moves across the room on its wheels and brings me the boiling water so I can pour it into my cup. Now is that a robot? And then ChatGPT is like, well, yeah, that's kind of a robot now. So you get into this weird, like, what exact abilities make something a robot, and yeah, how do you define a robot? And ChatGPT gave me an answer. It said that a commonly accepted engineering definition of a robot is a robot is a programmable machine that can sense, think, process, and act on the physical world. So it needs 3 ingredients: sensors, like cameras, touch sensors, temperature sensors, encoders. It needs computation, control logic to think, and it needs physical action, actuators. So if it doesn't have all 3 of those, engineers usually won't call it a robot. So for my kettle, ChatGPT says, well, it senses temperature with a thermostat. It turns off when it's boiling, but it does not adapt, it does not make decisions, and it does not act beyond a fixed mechanical sequence. That makes it an automated appliance, not a robot. But if you put wheels on it, now it detects when water is boiling, navigates to your table, avoids obstacles, adjusts its path, senses the environment, processes information, acts in a flexible way. Now it is a robot. So, and of course, you can go farther and farther into this topic and the line gets blurred. You can have a debate. You can talk about all kinds of technology. Well, is this a robot? What if you add this? Now is it a robot? But I think all of us have a general, it's like one of those, if you're trying in a legal setting, trying to define something on paper, it's really hard. But then you ask people, like in the real world, well, I know it when I see it. Like if you put something in front of me, oh yeah, that is a robot. Okay, that isn't. And you know instinctively why this is a robot and why that isn't, but it's not always that easy to break it down and define it exactly. But yeah, when it comes to a robot, you know it when you see it. Though there are, as I said, so many gray areas because ChatGPT did suggest my kettle is not a robot, but a Roomba is a robot. Like a Roomba, which goes around your apartment or your house automatically sweeping the floor because it satisfies those 3 criteria. But just yesterday, I was doing all these robot video searches, and there were like robot fails, which are really quite scary, but also quite funny. And one of them was a Roomba, which was going through a living room, but there were curtains hanging from the window, and the Roomba sucked up the curtains and then tore all the curtains down from the window, and everything went crashing and banging and everything was broken. So, okay, so now your Roomba is a robot, you're telling me, but it wasn't smart enough to know to avoid the curtains. Like are we really talking about a robot at that point? To my mind, a robot would realize it's not supposed to tear down the curtains and suck up the curtains. It's there to just sweep the floor. So I don't know. It feels like, okay, it has sensors, it processes, it moves, but I think you have to add a little bit of intelligence in there to be a true robot. That it doesn't just do a mechanical series of movements. It has to be aware of its environment in some way to be a true robot. I don't know, maybe I'm just overthinking it. I went on for many, many more questions and pages in my conversation with ChatGPT, but I've already touched on all of the topics briefly. Then I think towards the end I circled back and drilled down a little bit deeper on a lot of these topics. So, for example, my next question was about all of these giant companies that I'd never heard of. I just tossed that out as an interesting idea that the major players in the world of robotics, most of us have never even heard of. And then ChatGPT said, well, yeah, they are giants, but in a different universe. So Fanuc is one of the largest industrial robot manufacturers in the world. Never heard of the company, don't know where they're based, don't know what they make. But yeah, Fanuc, ABB, multinational automation and electrification conglomerate. KUKA, KUKI, has been a major player in automotive robotics for decades. And like, we've heard of Tesla, but I've never heard of Fanuc. You know, Fanuc sells servo motors, CNC controllers, robotic arms that spot weld car doors, and Tesla sells a car. They kind of sell a story. They're face-to-face with consumers, but Fanuc is not. So most people, in my world anyway, have never heard of them. And then ChatGPT gives me a good analogy. He says, well, everybody knows about Nike. They make the shoes, the Nike company, but nobody has heard of the companies that make the machines, that make the material that they build the shoes out of, right? And those are actually the more important companies. Nike is just the front-facing form of this world of other companies building the machines that build the machines that make the products, you know, that we buy. And it might be interesting that there's kind of two parallel technological worlds out there. There are all the companies that we've heard of, Apple, Samsung, Tesla, Sony, like that. They all have brands that we're familiar with. And then there's the industrial automation world dominated by these huge conglomerates that none of us have ever heard of. They added Siemens to that list. Yeah, it's all very, very interesting. And of course, in pop culture, you think of robots, what do you think of? Of course, you think of R2-D2, C-3PO, the Terminator, Data from Star Trek. You know, these are androids, humanoid robots. Nobody really thinks about the arm on the assembly line, you know, busy spot welding car doors 24 hours a day. You know, but that's the more important robot that's out there, you know, doing the real work. And the amazing thing there is that when you're thinking about the modern world, the shape of the world that we live in, these behind-the-scenes companies have probably had a bigger impact on the nature of our world than all the companies that we've heard of. We think of Samsung and Sony and all these companies as being what drives the world and shapes it, but it's in fact these other companies that have more of an influence creating, you know, the world that we live in today. And then after that, I kind of circled back around to Spot and the quadruped robots, because I know nothing about that as well. I know about Spot, but to be honest, I wasn't aware how widely Spot is already being used around the world in real world applications. And I wasn't aware that there were so many competitors. So I asked ChatGPT about that. And Unitree in China is probably one of their biggest competitors. And I guess their Spot competitor is called Go2 and B2. And their main advantage is they're a whole lot cheaper. And they have a huge volume like production volume capability compared to anybody making, bipedal robots, things like that. And then from China, there's also Deep Robotics. They also make a quadruped focused on industrial inspection and utility work, power grid and energy sectors. So yeah, I guess instead of sending humans out there to go make sure everything's still working, they just send the quadruped with all its cameras and sensors, and it goes for a long walk and walks the length of whatever industry they're in and looks at everything and checks everything over. Pretty amazing. And there's another company I'd never heard of called Anybotics from China, and their robot, the quadruped, kind of a clever name, but a play on words, called Anymal, like animal, but with a Y, because the company is called Anybotics, so their quadruped is called animal, but spelled with a Y, and Anymal, and widely deployed in the oil and gas and mining and heavy industry sectors, seen as Spot's most credible competitor, and less flashy than Spot, but very respected. Yeah, I've got to look these up. I've never seen them. I don't know what they look like. And another one from the United States called Ghost Robotics. And they also make quadrupeds, but they're used in defense and military context. And they have a strong foothold with U.S. government contracts. So I guess these are the quadrupeds where they're going to mount a gun on the little dog-shaped robot and send it off to shoot on the front lines. Makes perfect sense. And apparently there aren't as many quadruped competitors. Like I listed the 12 most popular humanoid robot companies, and those are just the 12 most well-known, and there's lots more. But the field for quadrupeds is much smaller. There's much fewer companies, but the technology is much more mature. It's established and is doing real physical work all around the world. So it's a much more mature technology, even though the number of players, the number of companies is much smaller. So I guess these Spot-type robots, they're used in oil refineries, nuclear facilities, chemical plants, construction sites, mining operations, infrastructure inspection, offshore platforms. And these, of course, the one thing they all have in common is that they're all very dangerous places, particularly for the fragile human body. So send in the quadruped, right? Send in the robot to go look around, do things, inspect, and then, then once you have all the information, then you can send in humans to do the repairs. Or who knows, maybe in the future the humanoid robots will then go in to do the actual repairs. But the quadrupeds are on the front line of inspection for all of these sorts of dangerous places. Yeah, that's very fascinating. And at the end of my conversation, again, I circled back around to like what the future is going to look like, and ChatGPT and I agreed that there's a strong possibility that these quadruped robots and wheeled robots, they are going to blaze the way. That even though all the hype is surrounding humanoid robots, we're first, like you and I as regular people, the first time we're going to encounter real robots roaming around, it's not going to be a humanoid. It's going to be something on wheels, something flying in the air like a drone. Can a drone be a robot? Of course, I think it can. Or a quadruped. Those are the robots, I think, that are going to quietly show up more and more in our daily lives. We already see the delivery robots, right? Most of the time when we see them on YouTube, it's because they failed. They're out there trundling along these cute little machines with wheels, and they're rolling along to do a delivery, and then they fall in a hole, get run over by a car, vandals destroy them or pick them up and throw them over a fence or whatever they do. But that type of robot, or the quadruped, I think those are the robots we're going to see everywhere in the future. They're going to become ubiquitous, and we'll become accustomed to them in our day-to-day lives. They're going to blaze the trail, and then after that, maybe they'll have paved the way for humanoid robots to start appearing. And then perhaps they will find kind of a niche spot here and there where the humanoid robots will play a role. But I think in terms of robots, of course, it's the assembly line robots. They're the first. They're the first robots that have transformed our world, but they're all working quietly inside factories that we're not really aware of them. And then you're going to have the quadrupeds, the wheeled robots. They're going to be everywhere. And then after that, maybe the humanoid ones. But I think it's an open question whether humanoid robots will ever really be a thing or not. Will they be everywhere, or are they just going to be fun toys, niche, just niche applications, and we won't see them in the real world as much as the hype thinks. The hype is conveying this idea that they're just going to be everywhere. We're all going to have a personal robot companion soon. But chances are, before that happens, you're going to have a little spot, a quadruped, or a little wheeled robot doing something useful for you before you get your humanoid robot. So that's all kind of interesting. Anyway, that is a morning coffee with Doug. I think I will end it there. Have another cup of my Wanda freeze-dried instant coffee. Yeah, just this morning, like I said, I had robots on my mind, and I wanted to learn a little bit more about them because I was aware that when I was talking about the Chinese New Year Gala celebration with Unitree's G1 robot, I was just talking off the top of my head. I didn't really know anything at all. I didn't even know that all of these other companies existed with humanoid robots. I had no idea how many of them there were. I didn't have any facts or figures at my fingertips. So I wanted to do a little bit more digging, a little bit more reading, and then talk about it this morning. My conversation with ChatGPT about robots, and now with you out there on YouTube. So that's it, shutting down, and I'll see you in the next video.